Before the Second World War had officially ended, it had ended in Europe, but not yet in Asia. Mackenzie King again decided to hold new Canadian federal elections, and they were held on June the 11th, 1945. Mackenzie King was 70 years old at the time. He had been in office first from 1921 to 1920, June 1926, then from September 1926 to 1930, and again since October or November 1935. And probably a significant plurality of Canadian voters wanted a change, even though Canada had been sheltered from direct fighting in the Second World War. Thousands of Canadian soldiers had been killed fighting in Europe or in the Asia-Pacific region. And there had been some wartime shortages in Canada. For example, new shirts had not been so easy to find. This information comes from a Canadian history book of those decades. But overall, the Liberals could point out to a fairly good record, and because of the wartime industries, there was at least close to a full employment in Canada. On the other hand, the wartime economy meant that by no means all Canadians had exactly the jobs that they wanted to do, but of course they wanted to remain employed in order to be able to make ends meet. So this was by way of introduction to the video. The total number of seats in the Canadian House of Commons remained at 245. The Liberals suffered quite a dramatic drop, even drastic drop in their popular vote to just 39.8%, or about 2,087,000 votes, and only 118 Liberals were elected. In other words, technically they lost their parliamentary majority. The Progressive Conservatives, under their new leader John Bracken, interestingly lost in the popular vote, dropping to 27.6%, or about 1,449,000 votes, but rose then due to the distribution of votes to 67 seats. The Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, led by Major James Caldwell, received 15.6% of the popular vote, or about 816,000 votes and 28 seats. The Social Creditors took about 4.1% of the popular vote, or 212,013 seats. The Liberals urged voters to build a new social order by endorsing the Liberal platform, which included $750 million Canadian dollars to provide land, jobs and business support for veterans, war veterans that is, $400 million of public spending to build housing, $250 million for family allowances, establishing an industrial development bank, loans to farmers, floor prices for agricultural products, and tax reductions. Alongside the already mentioned parties, 8 independent Liberals were elected, and they, at least most of them, would support the Liberals on questions of the budget and confidence. 6 independents were elected, 2 representatives of the nationalist Bloc Populaire of Quebec were elected, 1 Labour, Progressive or Communist Member of Parliament was elected. I believe he was the Polish-Canadian immigrant Fred Rose, who would then be convicted and lose his seat as a result of the Igor Buzenko affair that started in 1946. 1 independent CCF member was elected, 1 Liberal Progressive was elected as well. Mackenzie King, as we know, retired as Prime Minister in November 1948 to be replaced by his hand-picked successor, Louis Saint-Laurent of Quebec.